Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this video will be against a new fellow chess club member named Annieg001. So let's get to it. I think it's going to be good. E4, E6, D4, B6. So what am I pulling out? Well, I'm pulling out my favorite weapon, the Owen's defense, going for the center. And I'm also combining that with a theme in the French to push e6, maybe go d5 later, but also think about c5 later. So I'm keeping my options open. Knight c3, bishop b7, and now a3. Good move. Anticipating that I would play bishop to b4. So after knight f6, e5, I played knight d5, although I could have also played knight to e4, but I thought, take, and if something like knight f3, bishop to e7, bishop to d3, it's going to be even. So I said, knight e4, knight d5, they look somewhat the same, so I just play knight d5. If you take, bishop takes. But now bishop d3 happens, and I told our friend Annieg001 here that the g2 pawn is very tricky, and indeed it is. Knight f3 takes the rook, bishop to e4 now. Now it gets interesting, but I play c6. I was thinking about whether to play knight to c6 or not, but I wasn't sure if after d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, maybe there would be some pressure here. I didn't know. I didn't want to risk it. I played it safe, and I played the move c6. So after king to d2, queen attacks that bishop. I take the knight, bishop to e7, saying, you know what, I want to trade further. b4, I played d5 here. I kind of saw that, okay, white is going to play b5 maybe and try to take advantage of this pressure. But I played d5. I said, if you want to en passant, I will take, right? And I will have pressure on this d4 pawn. That was the plan. Bishop to d3 happened, and now knight to d7. I said, at the same time that I want to trade, I want to also develop my other piece. So I developed my other piece, king to d1, c5. So now I'm starting to break in the center. Ooh, okay, yes, I do yawn sometimes. Don't worry, it's all part of it. I'm human after all. So queen to g4, g6, f4. So at this moment, there might be f5 later on. But because I played g6, I sort of said, if you want to play f5, you're going to have to give up a bishop for it. And usually that's not going to be turning out great for white, since you're giving up so much for this one pawn push. So I just didn't matter. I just played queen to b6, put some pressure on this pawn. I could have also taken this pawn and said, I'm going to put my knight on c5, so that would have been also possible too, but I wanted to keep my pawn structure this way. Queen to b6, and now f5. So now I tested our friend Annieg001. I took. But then c3 happened, and I said, whoa, what a queen. And then I said, I'm going to give you a chance. So I gave Annieg001 a chance. The queen went to f4, takes, rook to b1, good move. Queen to a5, saying, if you take queen, I'm going to take this pawn, right? But if you take with a pawn, I'm going to play queen to a4, deliver that check, and try to get that king. So queen takes d4 happens, and now I take. Take, king d2, rook to c8, a4, and I trade, knight takes, and I slowly bring my pieces over, queen here, and checkmate. So that is that game. But what did we learn from that game? Well, we learned the only reason why our friend Annieg001 lost was one move. Bishop to d3. One move. This move gave me the initiative, and that's all I needed. I could make some mistakes, some minor mistakes, but that giving up the rook was just way too big of a mistake. That's okay. We'll learn from it, and sometimes we'll make those mistakes. We have to learn to forgive, repeat, and figure out what's right for you. So after that, it was pretty much I was able to convert comfortably and nothing big happened. So let's go into our second game. Our second game was very tricky. It was considered a gioco piano, or they call the Italian game. So e4, e5. So this is all standard, right? c3, knight f6, d4, take, take, bishop to b4. So the main line goes this: bingo, bango, bam, check, takes, queen to b3, d5, queen takes b4, rook d8. This is the main line. I am tired today, but that's okay. Bishop takes b4, that would be the main line. But in the game, our friend played knight to c3, and that's also a completely fine move. So, in the game I played knight takes e4, and after castles I played bishop takes c3, intending to play d5 and castle right away. But after d5, it got complicated all of a sudden, and I forgot what to do here. I could either play bishop f6, and after rook to e1, pinning the knight and the king, I could play knight to e7, and after rook takes e4, I could castle. That's one. Another option was knight to d6, I think, and after d takes c6, I said, well, can't really play rook to e1 just yet because my bishop's still hanging. So then I castle, b takes, and knight takes. Something like this. I was picturing it and I said, you know what, that's okay. But in the game I played the move knight to e5, and I thought this was logical but also tricky. So here's why it's tricky. Pawn takes bishop, knight is going to take white's bishop, and I'm going to be up a piece. So that's good. Now, the main test comes to the move knight takes e5. Bishop takes e5, and now rook to e1. So now, what does black do here? And I said, I have an extra piece, and I don't seem to be winning it at all, because white's going to get one of these two, because they're in the same line, and they look really sad. So what did I do? Bishop takes h2. King takes, queen h4, check, check, and I castle. Just a simple way to dodge those. So see what I did. What I did was I sacrificed this bishop because number one, I realized, well, the three pieces in the line, I'm bound to lose one. And I figured out I like my knight on e4. It's the best out of all of them. So I sacrifice my bishop. I get 2 pawns in return, and I get to castle. So then after queen to f3, our friend Annieg001 forgot the rook, And then I played d6 to try to get this other bishop out. After bishop d3, I played f5, just solidifying it. And after rook to e1, I got the rook again. And after rook 88, I'm ready to bring my rook in. I'm ready to reroute the knight to g4. And instead of watching all that happened, our friend Annieg001 resigned. So what really happened in this game? What went wrong? Well, there was nothing wrong with the opening. I can tell you that. Now the only move that went wrong had to be knight takes e5. And it's not obvious why. But seeing bishop takes h2, queen h4, and queen takes f2, that's already the sign where black is saying, I'm probably a little bit better and you're hanging on. So at this point, I would say the best move would have to be maybe queen to e2. Keeping this as a threat, and saying, if you take here, I can take this way, or I can take with the queen. So if I take with the queen, well, this knight's threatened, the bishop's threatened, and once the queen takes one of those pieces, we will be back to a very, very even game. But in the game, knight takes e5 happened, and once I got this in, once I got those pawns, especially when I got that free rook, and especially when I developed all my other pieces, that's where you saw the game was looking like, it's almost over. So that was that game. And now we go to the next game. This next game was also a very tough game. So d4, d5, c4, e6. This is what is known as the Queen's Gambit, and you might have seen the film, The Queen's Gambit, with main character Anya Taylor-Joy. So basically, the Queen's Gambit, this on the board is the Queen's Gambit. Knight c3, knight f6. And now I exchange on d5 because after bishop to g5, this is what they consider theory. They consider for white as positionally it's sound. For one, the plans of white are to play queen here, pawn here, bishop here, knight here, and castle. But later on, there's also something called the minority attack. And this has nothing to do with the real world. It has to do with chess. There is no actual attack on human minority groups. It's about an attack of pawns, a number of 2 pawns against more than 2 pawns, or some number of pawns against a larger number of pawns. So there will be this a4, b4, b5 sort of push, and that is what is called the minority attack. So after knight bd7, I said queen to c2. Now here's a common trap. Knight takes d5 fails because of knight takes d5, bishop takes, and bishop to b4. All of a sudden, this king has no room, and queen to d2 is forced. So I can't do that. I have to play queen to c2, and now black defends with c6. I play e3, h6, bishop to h4. So it's all regular development here. Bishop g4. I play knight to e5 now, threatening to take this since this is pinned. And after g5, which is very aggressive, I think it's an okay move, although it creates, these sort of weaknesses here. And so after bishop g3, queen d7, I played the move knight takes g4. And now, to look at it, I sort of regret it, because this knight is very powerful on e5. So I'll leave you with that, but positionally, which piece is better, the knight or the bishop?